Hello EuroPC friends. Well, what can I tell you? After 3 months of repairs, my Schneider EuroPC is finally fully working again and back together. The last construction site that I had was, of course, that the keyboard started to fail. So after 2 months of basically fixing the electronics and the motherboard, replacing a number of chips, I had to unplug and plug back, of course, the keyboard a couple of times from that motherboard. And the keyboard is just a foil cable, foil membrane keyboard, right? So that thing started to deteriorate, even though I was very careful in the end. Keys started to drop out, and then full lines of in the matrix, right? Full sets of keys disappeared. So yeah, I then tried to repair the keyboard to the best of my abilities, but given that this is really plastic and or mylar, right, and basically metallized printed contacts on a plastic or mylar sheet, there isn't much you can do to fix that. Yeah, you can try, of course, conductive paint and things like that. That usually can still work if the membrane, right, the keyboard membrane under the keys has some continuity issues. You can try to fix that, but the foil flex cable connector, right, that goes into the motherboard, right, once that is deteriorated, there's really not much you can do. So you cannot, use a soldering iron or any other kind of conductive paint. So in order to get that fixed, so I then tried to acquire a replacement keyboard from eBay, right, from Greece. I got this one, right, and so nice that I now also have an international and English layout, because this one is German only, right. But it turned out that the membrane, right, was worse than the one that I had. So that wasn't a solution either, right? So yeah, the way that works is, if you look at the keys, this is basically just conductive rubber stamp, right? And if that gets pushed down, it basically closes a contact on this plastic sheet with the printed metallized contacts, right? And it's not really a membrane, because membrane keyboards have basically 2 or 3 layers, right? And physical force is then used to push these layers together so that the contact is established, right? But here it's basically metallized, not metallized, it's conducting a rubber, right, which closes the contact. So there's only one layer of a plastic sheet, and so that's a bit different. So the resistance of a contact that's close goes down to 70 ohms or so, right? So it's not a perfect contact, right, because it's just conducting rubber, but it's good enough for the keyboard microcontroller to recognize that the key is pressed. So yeah, the only choice then I basically had was to make my own keyboard foil, right, or keyboard membrane, if you will, right. And so this is what I came up with in the end, right. So I used KiCad in order to design this. I basically scanned the original membrane, right, using my Epson scanner here, and so I basically glued, using clear tape, the original membrane on standard leather paper, right, and 3 sheets. So, and then I just, scanned this, right, so there is no limitation in the paper length with such a scanner, and the precision or accuracy of that turned out to be good enough in the tenths of millimeters, right. So then I had a TIFF or JPEG bitmap, right, and I then imported this into KiCad as a footprint, right, and that footprint, once then binarized into black and white so I could see the traces, I used as a stencil, basically as a to basically sketch through the traces, right, and reconstruct the contacts, right. And so this turned out then to actually match perfectly with the yeah, with the keyboard, right. And it's also very thin, right, so I opted for a 0.4 millimeter flexible PCB, and you can see that that's really a good fit. And it can't be much thicker than that, so the standard PCB thickness is like 1 or 1.5 millimeters or something like this, right? But if it's too thick, then you will have an issue with the metal carrier, right? So because the whole keyboard is, of course, and this is from my replacement keyboard, right, which I acquired from eBay in order to get the membrane, which then was bad as well, right? So you see if that nah, don't find the holes here. There you go. So if this is then resting on the metal carrier, there can't be much height added to this, basically based on the membrane, right? So this 0.4 millimeter thick flexible PCB is perfect for this, because otherwise you know, the height of this keyboard would have been increased and the lid probably wouldn't close properly anymore, right? It's a very tight fit, so with a standard PCB I would have had to flex down maybe the frame or something like that. But thanks to this very nice flexible keyboard PCB, right, I didn't have to do that. So yeah, here it is again. You see that I also have some wires, right? So on the back of it we also have a number of bridges basically, and that's also copied basically from the original membrane, right? The original membrane actually had say a 2.5 dimensional design, right? Because it basically used additional sheets of transparent plastic and conducting traces, right, in order to do these bridges. So it was single-sided. But of course, with the PCB, I could just, you know, go to the other side of the PCB and introduce wires, and you can't see them well because they're under the protection lacquer, right? But they are there. Yeah, I also made one mistake. So I when I traced this, right, in KiCad, so I have a tiny gap here, right? And you see that I already bridged this with conducting silver paint here. So without that, basically these numpad keys, namely 1, 2, 4, and 5 wouldn't work, right? So and then I was already thinking, oh, maybe the geometry isn't as good as I thought, and the stamps of the keys basically don't hit the contacts well enough, right? But luckily that wasn't the case, and I almost immediately spotted this one then as a common cause for those 4 contact groups, right? And then it was an easy fix. So I probably make one more version of this PCB in which this is fixed, right? And so the manufacturer that I used for this is JLCPC. And I was surprised by speed, quality, and price. So within 10 days from upload of the Gerbers, I had the PCBs in my hand, basically, right? And I paid $75, including shipping, for 5, which is really a good deal, right? So yeah, let me demonstrate that this actually works. So let's reboot the EuroPC. I have a reset button there, and then maybe maybe start works and type a little bit. So I have it, I use it with the VGA card here, right? So this is my external ISA card stack that I have connected, right? So I have the memory expansion and the CF IDE XT and a sound card and so on there, right? But so now let's just start works, and you already see that I'm typing on the keyboard and that it works, right? And but you can see that this is as good as the original keyboard, right? So all the keys are working flawlessly. As I mentioned, I had to do something to the numlock keys, right? But with conductive rubber in place, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 4, 5 are also working. So yeah, there you go, keyboard fixed. And so how do we actually connect this PCB to the EuroPC motherboard? First of all, let me turn that off, then I can show you how the connections are established. So in my keyboard membrane, or let's call it like this, right, even though it's not a membrane, right, you can see that I have pin header holes here, right? And those are fine pitch 1.27 millimeter pitch holes, right? This is the same spacing that was used for the original foil cable, flex cable connector, right? That plastic thing with conductive paint traces that deteriorated in my case, right? Which was the main cause of the whole problem. And so I simply, you know, soldered in pin headers, right? And then have ribbon cables. And you can see that here if we lift that up carefully. You see how it is connected here, right? So the connection to the motherboard is established using another connector board, right? And this connector board, I can show you here, looks like this. So basically it goes in like this, and I had replaced the flex cable connector with pin headers, with pins already on the EuroPC motherboard. This is the original pin layout from that flex cable connector here with these you know, alternating spaced standard 2.54 millimeter pitch pins, and this goes out then to this 1.27 millimeter fine pitch linear arrangement of pins, right? And yeah, so it's 29 pins. Pin number 1 here is not connected, right? And so it's 30 holes. And yeah, this goes on the motherboard, and then with further pin headers it goes into the cable. And there you have it. Works perfectly, and I no longer have any issues with any bad foil contacts or what have you, right? So have a look at the connection here. You can see that the ribbon cable connects there to the pin headers. Okay, careful with that, because I don't want to damage my motherboard again. Yeah, so what you need is then of course pin headers, you need the PCB, and yeah, drop me a note if you have a similar problem with your EuroPC keyboard, right, that it stopped working and you're having a hard time getting it working again, because I still have like 4 or so of these, actually 3, because I have 2 keyboards now. I still have 3 PCBs, membranes, right? And because I had to order 5, yeah, so I'm happy to part with some of those. And just keep in mind that I will have to, you know, fix your membrane with conductive silver paint like this. I can also show you the paints that I used. One moment, let me grab that. It's basically a pen. Where is it? There you go. So this is what I used. Silver conductive pen from MG Chemicals, right? And has a very strong odor and is very toxic. So if you use this, be sure to have the window open, right? And good ventilation. So that really gives me a headache very, very quickly. So that's what is used to bridge that tiny little 0.5 millimeter gap, right, in the KiCad floor that I had. So, and then of course you need the ribbon cables, right, and you can either crimp those yourself. I mean, it needs to be 1.27 millimeter pitch, right? These are some form of IDE, IDC pin box header, right, but the fine pitch ones. Alright guys, so yeah, just wanted to keep you updated on the progress of my EuroPC. Happy that it is all working now again, and so I can finally put the lid on and call it a day. Thanks for watching. Bye.